lately I have seen loads of media articles that frame the internet and social media as being root causes in a rising wave of political extremism, right-wing political extremism. Now, I don't believe this to be the case, and if it was the case, it should also be the case that we today would see far more political extremism than we have seen in the past, because it is only today, the last 10-15 years, that we have had social media. Now, this is not the case, and in fact, in the 60s and 70s, the rates of political extremism were substantially higher than they are today, and they didn't have the internet or social media. So how did that happen? Now, if you want to understand that, you need to move the level of analysis away from the medium that radical ideas use and to the ideas themselves. And in order to do so, it is very useful to think of them as memes in the Richard Dawkins sense, as self-preserving, self-reproducing units of cultural content that allow for cultural evolution. Now, a defining feature of memes is that they will avail themselves of whatever is the media channels that they can use to populate themselves. And today, that is social media. In the 60s or 70s, that was the radio, the television, the universities, journals, books, these kinds of things. It makes no more sense to say today that social media radicalizes as saying that the radio radicalized people in the 60s and 70s. No, it is the ideas that radicalize people. But there are many ideas, and most ideas do not make people radicalized. But in the 60s and 70s, ideas like Stop the War movement were reflecting real problems in the society underneath that gave these ideas real power, that made them resonate with people. They were seeing that American youth, that Vietnamese youth were dying in a senseless war. So the Stop the War movement became popular. And again, today, if you look at right-wing radical political ideas, I think they are gaining popularity because they reflect real underlying causes in our society. It is the ideas that radicalize people, not the media in which they use. If we didn't have social media, we would still see people becoming right-wing radicalized because it reflects actual conditions in the underlying society. That is my opinion. Now, furthermore, people will proclaim that exposure radicalizes. You go on social media, you go on the internet, and you get repeated exposure to these ideas, and you become radicalized. So it's the exposure that comes with social media and the internet that radicalized it. But this is also not true, and you can see this from using a simple test of logic, because if exposure radicalizes, we should become radicalized by everything we get exposure to, but we don't. For example, most of us have gone to school for 10, 20 years and been exposed almost every year to poetry, literature, these kinds of things. Now, very few of us become or fall in love with poetry and literature and these kinds of things. So it's not exposure. But on the other hand, if you have exposure to, let's say, crack or methamphetamine or heroin one time, you can be dependent on it for life. So it's not exposure that in and of itself that radicalizes, it is the thing that you get exposure to. So once again, if we follow this logic, we come back to the fact that it is the ideas themselves that we need to analyze to find the root cause of extremism. And we then again arrive to the fact that these ideas resonate with people. That is why they become popular. That is why they can populate. There are loads of ideas, but most of them do not populate. So the ones that populate, they populate because they resonate with people. So if more people are becoming right-wing extremists today, it is because of underlying factors in the society that make them right-wing extremists. Now, if we take the media's narrative and their logic, the video that I'm showing on the screen right now would radicalize me, not from the actions that this man is doing, chopping into an electronic store with a hammer, stealing, and then the whole act going unpunished. No, that is not the thing that radicalizes me. I'm being radicalized by the fact that I'm seeing it on social media. It is the fact that I'm seeing it on social media that radicalizes me. Had I seen this on regular media, on the television, or heard about it on the radio, I would not become radicalized. Of course, because they wouldn't tell me that this was an immigrant. I need to see the video myself to see that this is an immigrant. And I can then understand that this is actually reflecting, it is real underlying causes. It is not an isolated event. No, I see a pattern. And that makes me radicalized. This guy's actions makes me radicalized. So it is the ideas that radicalize, not the medium in which these ideas populate. Now, if you look at the historical examples of radicalization and analyze them, or historical examples of extremism, you will not find social media or the internet as a defining cause that runs through all of them, as a thread that goes through all of them. No, of course not. But we have always had radicalizations. We have always had extremisms. Christians used to burn witches and disbelievers and these kinds of things. They were radical. Then again, when the Reformation happened, they were labeled as radicals. This always happens, and ideas come along, they populate, and they might be in opposition to the reigning narrative of the time, and they will be labeled as extremisms and radicalizations, but it is not the medium that they use. So thanks for watching. Please comment down below what you think about my thoughts on radicalizations and social media. If you agree, if you disagree, comment down below, and thanks for watching.